Several cases came down. Perkins and Garcia, notably, pretty much have indicated that the ABC test is not supposed to be used to determine whether or not you're an employee for purposes of obtaining workers' compensation benefits. However, as we've been discussing, there's a lot of language that you will find in dynamics and the cases subsequent that you use for fulfilling the statutory purpose. And that's going to be the bulk of what Aaron's going to talk about, and I'm going to just talk about how we determine who somebody is as an independent contractor versus an employee when it's for purposes of looking at workers' compensation benefits through the lens of Borrello and 2750.5. For me, I always like to start with a statute that basically presumes that everybody is an employee unless proven otherwise. And the burden to prove that somebody is not an employee rests on the defendant, not on you. Your job is just to say, hey, he's working, he got paid, he's an employee, and it's up to the employer to demonstrate why they have no liability for workers' compensation benefits. To get to that point, I'm going to look at a larger, more practical view before I get into factors as to how we go about doing that, which is when you have a client who's coming in and there's a question as to whether or not they're an employee or an independent contractor. Usually it's because they are being treated as an independent contractor. They're getting 1099s, nobody's taking out taxes, they're not getting overtime, they're usually not getting benefits. And the practical reason for this is it saves the employer money. They don't have to pay for workers' compensation insurance, they don't pay their fair share of taxes, they avoid overtime wages,
It's a great business model. It's a really great business model for this law.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when we're looking at this, the reason why this is kind of important for you as the practitioner is when someone is being treated as an independent contractor, you're likely going to find that the employer is not insured for workers' compensation benefits for that employee. Sometimes they are, but most of the time they're not because they're skating the laws. And what you need to be focused on in this situation is if you have an employee who's working for somebody who's not insured, they also have a civil right of action. And that civil right of action can actually provide that client with much better benefits than you get through the workers' compensation system, because in the civil arena you're talking damages, in the workers' compensation arena you're talking benefits. And if they're not insured, then you're going to get a presumption of negligence against the employer. You're going to be able to avoid having analysis of comparative fault. There are many benefits you have when you're pursuing a civil action against an employer who's uninsured. And it's something to be aware of when you're meeting with your client and you're trying to establish that they're an employee. You may have this potential third-party action against the employer that you don't want to overlook. And Aaron's going to talk an awful lot about how it has consequences for how you calculate AWE because of the overtime issues, the meal and rest break issues. So it kind of all folds into itself. When we look at, so that's kind of something to be aware of when the client comes to you and they're saying, I got 1099s and I have an employment agreement and they call me an independent contractor. That's not the end of the story, that's just the beginning of the story.